It's week 10 of 2018, and on the ITProTV podcast, we're talking about a lot of Microsoft news, specifically some things related to Linux. And we're also talking about the biggest ever DDoS attack to take place and how you can take some steps to mitigate an attack on your own business. That's all coming up on the ITProTV podcast, starting right now. Hello and welcome to the ITProTV podcast. I am your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I am joined, as always, by Mr. Don Pizzette here in week 10 of 2018. How's the first 9 weeks been for you so far, Don?
Boy, I tell you, I each week get more and more excited to come in and film the podcast because there's some weeks there's some really exciting news. Some weeks I sit down, I'm like, well, you know what was really significant? But there's usually at least one hardware product that I can criticize each week. So we keep coming back for more.
I think we have a couple this week that you can criticize, so that's very exciting. This first story, though, to jump right in here, I don't think it's something to criticize. I think this is actually probably a good story. This is on Reuters. Microsoft is offering governments a local version of Azure Cloud Service. And so, John, you're going to have to help me out here, as you typically do with explaining things. Local cloud service. So how's that work?
You know, there's a big misconception out there about what cloud actually means. And the misconception isn't necessarily our fault. It's all the vendors that are pushing this stuff forward. In Microsoft's land, they actually have this very specific idea of the private cloud and public cloud. So what we used to call on-premises servers, Microsoft just calls the private cloud. Right? You've got these servers, they're on-prem. And if you have virtualization and you're doing automated deployment, it's no different than what's being done in the public cloud where you have automation and virtualization and all that. So there's kind of two separate entities. And they've really been pushing the hybrid cloud market, not just Microsoft, but Amazon and the others as well, that if you've got on-premises servers and you're just not ready to put everything in the cloud, you can go hybrid, go where some of your stuff is in the cloud, or maybe most of it and just a little bit of it's local. Where that's worked really well is with private sector businesses. But governments, they're a little more unique. And so I know Amazon and Microsoft have both offered special data centers that are just available for government. So Amazon has their GovCloud data center, and governments can safely store their data there and know that it's not exposed to the public. But as far as on-premises, they haven't really allowed connecting that. And so Microsoft has finally updated this product called Azure Stack. And Azure Stack is a free product. Microsoft helps you link your local servers with your Azure cloud servers. And now governments can use that to still have their private systems and be able to exchange that information. There's two big benefits to this, right? One, it lets them pick and choose what goes up to the internet and what stays local. But two, it lets them maintain their citizens' data on servers that are physically in that country. And that's getting to be a bigger and bigger concern for every country that's out there. GDPR, how do you spell that? It's going active as far as like its penalties are going active in May in 2 months. And a lot of people are starting to panic because they've got to get all these extra protections in there. But one of the things is they want you to make sure that you're storing customer data in the same country as that customer. Because if there's a German citizen and I'm storing their data on a U.S. server, the U.S. government could seize that U.S. server and now spy on the German citizen. Like that's what happens. So they're trying to start to partition that, and Microsoft is responding and offering a product that allows you to do that easily.
And that was actually a story a couple of weeks ago where I believe it was the FBI looking to get data from Microsoft, but it was stored, I think, in Ireland at their big data center over there. And so, they were pushing back on that. So I could definitely see how that would play in. I always thought the local version of the cloud meant that you basically had a backup of, the things that were in the cloud stored locally. But you're saying that this could be separate information. So you could have some data here locally, some data in the cloud.
And the way you described it, you could do that.
Yeah.
You could do where you had a cloud deployment and it was just backups locally. You could do the other way around, which is a little more common, where your on-premises stuff is what's working and the cloud stuff is your backup. They could both be active. All of those work. You probably wouldn't want them both to be backups. You need a production somewhere.
Yeah, go ahead and have one of them out there.
Yeah, but that certainly achieves it. And it's interesting to see all these services where they're just trying to make them more cloud friendly. And that Microsoft lawsuit that you mentioned, it is Microsoft versus the United States, and it reached the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. We'll find out there, and they're saying, yeah, you can subpoena the records we have here in the U.S., but those servers in Ireland, that's in Ireland, and of course, the U.S. government says, well, you're a U.S. company, and those are your assets. So
they're also an Irish company, from what I can understand.
Probably
but
more
this will be
think.
interesting. Yeah, they're much smarter people than Don and I will be taking a look at that. Or at least me.
Yeah, my taxes. I wish my taxes were like hidden away in Ireland somewhere.
Yeah. Oh man, that'd be great. That'd be great. All right. So sticking with Microsoft, our next story comes to us from Microsoft. From their blog. And this is an announcement that Windows insiders, who we've talked about recently, are getting a first look at new privacy screen settings layouts that are coming to Windows 10. So I guess we've got some new updated looks here that Don's going to show us, and Windows insiders are getting the first look. So what's new in this?
All right. So at first glance, you might look at this story, especially if you're somebody who's not active in like the Linux or EFF world, that, all right, it's a privacy screen. Who really cares, right? Every time you install a modern operating system, it asks you for your privacy settings. Most people ignore it, or it asks for location data, whatever, and it's just not a big deal. But with this one, it is important because, Windows 10 took a lot of criticism when it came out because people said that it was effectively like a marketing platform. And in the early days, Microsoft was giving out this upgrade to Windows 10 for free. So if you were running Windows 7 or Windows 8, and you could just upgrade to Windows 10. It's the first time, first time in my knowledge, that Microsoft has given out a free upgrade like that. And a lot of people were saying, well, wait a minute. If you dig into the privacy policy, when you go to Windows 10, it's effectively a marketing platform. It's installing suggested apps without asking you. It's got recommendations all over the place. Cortana is listening to everything you do. Location services are all reporting back to Microsoft. So there was a lot of pushback on that. And so what Microsoft did is they said, okay, we need to revisit that and try and make that better. And they've now created additional privacy settings that you can go in. And you've always been able to control things like your location-based data, but now you've got this tailored experiences area where you can go in and start to adjust what's happening. Like location data and diagnostic data, those were the two choices before. It's this tailored experiences, and unfortunately the screenshot they released doesn't show any of the detailed stuff, but if you read through it, it says, tailored experiences mean personalized tips, offers, and recommendations to enhance Microsoft products and services for your needs. In other words, they allow Microsoft to match up advertisers with you based on how you use your computer. In order to do that, Microsoft has to know how you're using your computer, including where you live, what times you use the computer, what websites you visited. All of that is information they use to build your marketing. Well, you know more about marketing than me. It's like a marketing persona, right?
Yeah, they're building a persona around you, and I mean that's why you're able to see all of the same ads once you visit that Amazon link once. You're seeing that thing just following you around the internet. I mean that's the same kind of thing here. I mean a lot of people talk about how gosh, I mentioned I wanted to start taking karate classes when I was at my house, and now all of a sudden I'm getting karate ads on my computer. Is this my Alexa? Is this my Google Home? Or so that's where we get into all these things. If you do something once, you're checking a box for someone that has said, yes, I want to receive information about someone that does this activity, and then get it. But I'm looking at this, Don, and I'm reading inking and typing in the bottom left-hand corner. You're basically saying, yes, I'm okay with Microsoft being a keylogger. Is that what I'm taking away from this?
Yes, sort of. So what they're tracking there, and they disclose a lot of this stuff, although some people want it to be a little more clear. There's the handwriting recognition. If you're one of the 8 people that got the Surface Pen, which actually it's really amazing. Like it works really well. The problem is pens are dumb, and people recognize that. So,
but says the guy with an iPad Pro, do you not use the pen?
I use it occasionally, but not to like write or draw with. I use it because when you're doing like Sudokus and stuff, it's easier to tap on the squares. I use it as more of a mouse. But with the handwriting, you could write and it would turn it into typewritten characters. Like it's not optical character recognition. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. Anyhow, so the accuracy of that, when you would correct a word, it would send information back on that, or the autocorrect for text, it would send that back to be able to tweak it and make it better. It is in a form an invasion of your privacy. It's a trade-off for convenience. Google News is a great example of this because Microsoft, they aren't the only ones who do this. Google,
Sure.
they're the masters at it.
Yeah.
With Google News, if you click on a few Detroit Red Wings articles, from then on, anytime there's news coming out of the Detroit, which is not often enough this season, that you'll start to see those articles. They come up front and center. Or if I get on a plane, it'll show Gainesville news when I'm getting on the plane, and then if I land in Houston and I get off and I look at my phone, it's already switched to Houston news. Like it pays attention to location. That's a trade-off we make, right? And as long as you have a choice, a way to opt out and say, I don't want that, people are okay. But a lot of the vendors, they just haven't been giving you a choice. So Microsoft's trying to do that. We'll see how it pans out. This isn't a Windows Insider preview, so it hasn't made it into the full-on product yet. It's slated to come out in the spring update, which is still a few months off.
Cool. So that keylogger will be coming to you later this year.
Well,
so
that's
look
already
forward.
in there.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah. Now you can just turn it off. Yes.
There you go.
That's exciting. All right. In maybe some better news then for Microsoft and Windows. So we've talked a lot about the integrations with Linux and Windows for a while now, and how Microsoft's really embracing that open source community. Well, this announcement also from the MSDN blog on Microsoft. Debian GNU Linux for WSL now available in the Windows Store, so you can actually just go right into that Windows Store now and grab a copy of Debian. So this is a virtual machine then that you're running.
Sort of, yes.
Okay.
So right now we're in this really interesting world, and in our New Year's episode, I kind of postulated my theory on how Microsoft is embracing Linux as a server platform, and I really just don't see a world where Windows Server 2016 or 2019 or whatever is even necessary anymore in just a few years out from here. But this is a company that in the past said that Linux was like a cancer, that they were really aggressively against it. Now they've embraced that open source movement and they've really kind of jumped in there. They introduced the Windows subsystem for Linux. It was in the Fall Creators Update, I believe, is when it was rolled out. I had it in an insider preview, so I don't remember exactly when it came out. But it allowed you to basically drop to a command prompt in Windows, type bash, and all of a sudden you were in an Ubuntu Linux instance. And it's running using container technologies, just like Docker or anything else. It is technically a virtual machine under the hood. But you don't see it that way. Like, you don't have to install the operating system. You don't have to go through all this stuff. You just type bash and all of a sudden, pow, you're in that shell. And when they launched that feature, it was just Ubuntu. And there's people like myself who aren't necessarily the biggest fans of Ubuntu. It's a good platform, but I don't like it for servers. I prefer Red Hat for that stuff, or CentOS. Well, Microsoft said at that time that they were going to allow other platforms to get into that market. And everybody expected SUSE Linux to be one because Microsoft has partnerships with them. That still hasn't happened. They announced Debian, though. So now, when you install the Windows subsystem for Linux, you get Ubuntu. But if you go to the Windows App Store, it should be pretty easy to find. It'll be one of the 7 apps available in the Windows App Store because there's not much there. But you can find Debian, and you can install it, and now your Windows subsystem for Linux will be a Debian instance. Now, remember that Ubuntu is based on Debian, so there's not that much difference between the two. This was kind of an easy button for Microsoft to push to deploy this one, but it is nice to see more of those platforms coming out. And they show an example of it, like, I don't know if I can make that picture bigger or anything, but it's like super blurry, where they drop to a command prompt and just type bash, and all of a sudden they're in that Debian instance and off they are. It's pretty neat stuff to be able to do that and run your Linux or Unix-based applications. Things like Docker or Node.js or whatever, you can fire these things up right inside of a command prompt in Windows and not have to go into a full-on VM.
And we had a show recently where we actually talked about Kali Linux and how it is a great tool for pen testing and security. Maybe not the best for daily driver, but the day before this announcement came out about the Debian install there, Kali Linux was also made available in the Windows Store for WSL. So this sounds like a great use of that, where I want to use these pen testing tools. I don't want to have a whole machine that's just dedicated to running this, and so now I can run it right there on my Windows machine. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And, I've been to a lot of security conferences and I met and talked with a lot of pen testers, and I'm always surprised at how many of them run Windows because I know that, most of the tools are actually developed for Linux or they're open source tools. They're not necessarily ported into Windows, but a ton of them run the Windows platform for whatever reason. Well, they then have to spin up a VM to be able to run Kali Linux, and they've got to keep that updated. And Kali isn't the easiest thing to get going in a VM. There's a couple of places out there that that actually release virtual machines that are pre-built for it that you can use, but it is a bit of a challenge. And so you end up with some people saying, "Wow, I use those tools so much, I'm going to run Kali Linux as my daily driver," which is a terrible idea. So here, again, you go into the Windows App Store, you click Install, and it leverages the Windows subsystem for Linux, and then you've got it. You basically fire that up and you drop to a command prompt. And this is a super low resolution image on the Microsoft blog. I don't know why they're so anti high res, but you can see the blurry text here that lets us know we're in Kali Linux. Yeah, it's blurry.
I think
me
they just
too.
blur it because they know you're on a Mac, and they
might be
set
it.
it. Yeah.
So just like that's it. Yeah, unacceptable. But anyhow, so again, really cool to see this. I bet we'll see more platforms like this get released where there's things like free PBX, right? It's a voice over IP system. It's built on top of Linux. They have distros that are out there for it. And so people run it on a Linux server. But if it could just be an app in the Windows App Store, and now you fire up a free PBX system, or MySQL, where the Windows version is a little flaky, Apache, where the Windows version is super flaky, that you could bring it up right here inside of WSL and stay on a Windows server if that's what Microsoft's actually going for.
So is this something that the people that are maintaining those Linux distros, they're responsible for putting these in the App Store? Or is this something that Microsoft is doing and taking and pulling those into the store?
So right now, it's actually an effort on both.
Okay.
So these companies have to reach out to Microsoft and express their interest, and then Microsoft has to pick them to say, okay, let's work together and do this. And they've kept that really limited. The original WSL was launched with Ubuntu because Canonical is they're a for-profit company, and they saw business sense in this, and so they partnered with Microsoft and did it. Some of the more like open source, totally free type systems that are out there, the people like OpenBSD, I think it'll be a long, long wait before you see that one pop up in the Windows App Store. But it does require effort on both sides.
All right. Well, speaking of security, which I guess we were kind of talking about in talking about Kali Linux, and speaking of Microsoft, this story we have on a website that I just love the name of, bleepingcomputer.com. Microsoft stops malware campaign that tried to infect 400,000 users in 12 hours, and this was all done with Microsoft's Windows Defender, which we've talked about a lot of different tools out there in terms of firewalls and different threat monitoring things that you can use, and this is just the one that comes with your machine, and it seemed to be pretty effective in stopping this. Looked like a cryptocurrency mining attack. So, Don, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, in Windows 7 and earlier, you were really responsible for your own antivirus. That people would have to get McAfee or Norton or whatever it is that they chose to buy and throw on there. And everybody had their own preferences. I used to always run Sophos, and you'd throw that on there and protect your system. And starting with Windows 8, Microsoft enhanced Windows Defender because they had acquired a couple of antivirus companies, and they merged into Windows Defender so it could do both antivirus and anti-malware. And there was some outcry from the antivirus companies of the world saying, well, now Microsoft is pushing us out, but they went with it anyway. So all these Windows 8 and Windows 10 machines that are out there already have protection built in. And if you install your own antivirus, it just replaces what's in there, but you're guaranteed to have that Windows Defender up and running, if nothing else. That puts Microsoft in a position where if they learn about an attack, any kind of at-scale attack, they can push Windows Defender updates out and protect those machines and stop the spread of that. That's really, really useful when you have people like the elderly couple down the street that doesn't really know how to use a computer, but they have it so they can email their grandkids. Their computer gets infected, they don't even know it. And now it's just flooding data across the internet day in and day out. They don't even realize it. Well, here, Microsoft can step in and try and protect from that. So what they found here was that there was a malware campaign that was pushing pretty hard. It was going to hit 400,000 users in about 12 hours. Now, that's certainly not a world record. There have been others that have spread faster, but they were able to push out updates and stop it. This one, if it infected your machine, what it would do is continue to try and spread, and then it would start mining electronium, which is a cryptocurrency I've never heard of. I have no idea if it's worth anything or not, but that's what it was trying to do, and that's it. The interesting thing about all of this that I found was that the actual malware strain that was used is not new. It's several years old. So Microsoft stopped it, but if it's several years old, why wasn't it already being stopped? They don't really say that.
Well, they say at one point here that Microsoft says this, and I mean quotes, new Dufoil variant. So
okay, it was a variant
tweak.
on
Yeah.
All right, I could see that, I guess. Although that highlights the weakness of signature-based protection, right? So if you modify malware even just a little bit, the signature fails, and now it gets through. I don't know. Everybody's got a different approach for this stuff.
Well, I guess in this case it actually worked, and they were able to identify it and weed out that traffic. So that is good news, certainly for anyone using Windows Defender. Now we've mentioned earlier that Don is going to get his opportunity to make fun of a device, and I assume that this is the article where he's going to do that, because if I know one thing about Don, is he hates anything Google Pixel related, and this is a guy that went out and got the Pixel 2 when it first came out. And didn't you get a broken one or?
You know, my saga with the Google Pixel is amazing. Let me add some clarifying words here, just so everybody knows. I really like Google, and I love Android as a mobile platform. I've had numerous Android phones since the Nexus 1. I've used a lot of Android phones and tablets, which they don't make anymore, and other devices. I love Android, but I am not a fan of the Google Pixels. And I bought the Pixel 1, pre-ordered it, had it for about a month, and just was not happy with that and got rid of it. The Pixel 2, I pre-ordered. That one they shipped me one that had failed QC. It had a failed QC slip in it, so they had to send me a second one, and I had it maybe a week, and just so many frustrations, like so many bad design decisions in that phone. And it kills me because every time you hear somebody praising it, like, this is the best phone ever. Did you use it?
Yeah, have you used any other phone?
As just like a regular use phone.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff on there that takes 5 steps that should take 2. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, then this will be good news for you, Don. This is from Ars Technica. Google is ending major OS support for Nexus phones and the Pixel tablet. So obviously not for the Pixel phone,
right,
because those are pretty new still, and they'll be ending support for that probably next year, I would assume.
Well, so let me tell you why this is significant and why I think this whole thing is funny. In the past, if you wanted the pure, unfiltered Android experience, and you wanted to make sure that you got the latest updates, when Google announced the new version of Android, you wanted to be the first person to run it. You bought the Nexus phone. The Nexus phones ran just plain old Android, not messed with too much, as close to AOSP as you could get, without actually being AOSP. And then when an update would come out, you would get it right away, and it was awesome. Google moved away from that with the Pixels. The Pixels don't run pure Android. They run Android plus a bunch of Pixel modifications, and Google has kind of made that their own, so no other phone can have those, like the portrait mode feature on the camera, which is an awesome feature, but it's not a part of Android. It's a part of the Pixel camera app, and so nobody else can have that. The interesting thing here is that Google announced that they're ending major OS support for the Nexus phones, for all the Nexus phones. So that's it. They're gone. And on the tablet side, the last tablet that Google sold was the Pixel C. That's where the Pixel name was originally used before they switched it over to the phones. So what that means is that if you want to get the latest update, if you want to run the latest Android operating system the moment it comes out, Google's only development platforms now are the Pixel phones, which aren't true Android. So how are you supposed to develop like that in an environment where it doesn't match the other vendors? So now for developers, it's going to be harder because they don't have a reference platform to work from anymore. And for other people, they're going to lose sight of even what original Android even is. They're going to view it as being this Pixel platform. So maybe that's what Google wants. Maybe they want to start shoehorning people into this and killing off the competition. I don't know what the plan is there, but the Pixels are not good phones, and that's all that's left is your development platform. So here's hoping the Pixel 3 kicks butt. If it doesn't, I don't know where that's going.
Well, will you pre-order the Pixel 3?
You know, I will. I'll order it. And it's like that the Pixel 1 that I had, it was awesome. That phone kicked some serious butt. I've had a number of other Android phones and Pixel device, not Pixel, sorry,
Well, I thought you said
Nexus.
you used the
Sorry, I screwed
Pixel
up.
for one month, you said.
The Pixel not so much, but like my Nexus one, I used that thing for years.
Yeah.
That thing was great. You know, they were made by HTC. HTC's making some of the new stuff now, so it should all be the same. But the Samsung phones do really well. The other vendors, even the Asus phones, they're cheap and they fall apart, but they're cheap, so you don't mind that they fall apart. And they a lot of times will run the stock Android. It's an interesting field, and I'm curious what that direction is going to be.
If only they could have turned that Nexus into a laptop phone hybrid, then that would have just been the best.
I could overlook certain weaknesses.
Well, this next one is, I hope, not something that we're going to make fun of, because I think this is super cool. But it's interesting that Don brought this story up, because we went to CES 2016, I think, and we went out around and did interviews, and Don had some rules that no drones, no VR, and we didn't really get to go see the TVs. You know, I was really excited because they have that year the TVs you could roll up the OLED screens and stuff like that. I really wanted to see that, but wasn't in our wheelhouse. But this is a TV story, but it's super cool. So Samsung, and this is on QZ.com, Samsung's new TVs are almost invisible. And the reason that is because basically it looks like, it says before you hang your TV or wherever you're going to put your TV, you take a photo of that space where it's going to go, of the wall behind it, whether it's concrete or wood or a drywall, and that image then becomes the background for the TV. I guess when it's off, they maybe do one of those low power mode things. And so as you can see in that photo there, it looks like a concrete wall, and it looks like the TV. Basically, you just see the bezel, and you see the date and weather and stuff on the screen there. But I'm sure those are settings as well. But that's super cool.
You know, to me, this is so ridiculously awesome, and it's cell phone technology making it into the TV world, because a lot of the TVs, they're smart TVs. They effectively have a mobile operating system stuck inside of them. Some of them have Roku's built in and all sorts of crazy stuff. Samsung has their own. I forget what theirs is called. It's got some name, but anyhow, that's the really informative, hard-hitting news right there. It's got some name, but what they've done, the bezels have gotten smaller and smaller, just like on cell phones, on the bigger TVs. And once the bezels start to go away, that's what really facilitated this technology is, hey, if it's got a mobile operating system in it, and we can display a lock screen or a low-power off screen or whatever, you can stick a picture on there, blow it up, and it makes the TV look invisible. And then they lay widgets on top of it, which you don't have to do, but a blank wall isn't necessarily the most attractive thing either. But by laying it out like that, it's just such a cool visual effect. And I know this isn't necessarily IT news, but I just thought this was really cool to see come out there. I don't know if I would have this at home, but I could see this here in my office, where I've got old Vigo the Carpathian behind me on the wall, and imagine having a TV like right on Vigo's chest, and you wouldn't even know it was there until I turned it on, and then who knows?
Like Vigo's holding the TV then. And I don't mind, Brad, if you want to take my camera off and go ahead and get a good shot of Vigo there, because it's very impressive. Don has this life size, I guess you would say. This is 6 foot tall Vigo the Carpathian from Ghostbusters 2, one of the top 2 Ghostbusters movies, in my opinion. And right there staring down at us the whole time.
He could be holding a TV with a flowing river of slime in it.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that would just be so awesome.
Yeah, that would. Oh, don't get lost in the eyes. You don't want to do that.
Show me angry.
Quickly. Okay, thank God. All right, that was close there. Yeah, that's really cool, and I'm sure that won't be cheap, but eventually when it kind of becomes a more commonplace thing, I'm excited.
Honestly, it should be cheap because it's just displaying wallpaper.
But anytime you had some kind of value to something to make it stand out, it's gonna jump up. But in theory, without the low power mode, you could do this on any TV by just loading a TV from USB. Yeah. So, but to have that ability to have that and I haven't read if it says it's in a low power mode, but I assume it's got to be if it's up like that. But I've seen TVs now that have kind of rotating artwork or things like that. So that excuse me, the technology isn't new and crazy, but just the use of it is very good. Now, are you going to be excited when we get those curved bezels around the edges of the TVs? I know you love that with your phones.
Yeah. Well, yeah, at least you don't have to put a screen protector on your TV yet.
True.
But I do remember. I never had this, but did you ever see the TVs where they had the backlight on them, and the backlight would change color? So if it was a green scene, it would cast out green.
Yeah, and I've seen those as plugins too. You can buy a USB thing that I guess those in that case wouldn't replicate the color that's on the screen, but I've seen the backlight ones, and they say it's a much better. I guess the contrast off of the wall or something helps.
I've never seen one in person, but I know they were selling for a while. Maybe the fact that I haven't seen one in person indicates how well that technology works.
Or it's so expensive still that it just
And
hasn't come down.
I don't hang out with rich people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I think now we're back to a piece of hardware that maybe we will make fun of just a bit. But there was bad news for people last week that were trying to virtually be somewhere else as all of Oculus Rift's headsets stopped working, or excuse me, Oculus's Rift head. Oh man, all of the Oculus Rift headsets.
There we go.
That have stopped working due to an expired certificate. So this is one of those very avoidable outages.
Absolutely, and this is an IT article, even if you don't care about Oculus headsets at all, which I don't in particular. Certificates, everybody expects SSL to, or I say SSL, but it's really TLS now, right? Transport Layer Security. That when you communicate over the internet, you need your data to be secure. Pretty much everybody uses TLS usually 1.2 at this point. So we have this secure communication. In order for that to work, you got to have a certificate, and the certificate has to be valid. And when you buy a certificate, most of the registrars will only issue a certificate that goes up to 2 years old. Or 2 years of lifetime before it expires. The shorter the lifetime, the more secure the certificate is, because it means attackers have less time to try and break it. So when we buy certificates, they normally have a time limit. This article is from TechCrunch, and so let's look at TechCrunch's certificate. So if I pull their cert up, I can see that they bought theirs from DigiCert. We buy ours from DigiCert as well. I like them. They're not an advertiser or anything, but if you need a cert, the DigiCert guys, they really know what they're doing.
You can sing a jingle too?
Yeah, I know. Maybe have a song.
DigiCert.
They do certificates. All right. Anyhow, so they've got DigiCert. It says theirs expires February 26, 2020, right? So in 2 years, right? Or just a hair under 2 years. There's their certificate, which they probably just recently renewed. Although DigiCert did sell 3-year certificates last year. They don't anymore, but they probably just renewed. If a website doesn't renew, what happens? You go to it and you get a warning saying this site is not secure. The certificate's expired, and the end users get that warning to stop. Well, for us, we can recognize that happen. And if you still trust it, maybe you could continue and move past it or whatever. It's a website. But for IoT devices, for hardware, things like video game consoles, VR headsets, car dashboards, clocks, stuff like that, when they hit a certificate failure, they just don't talk. And at Oculus, somebody forgot to renew their certificate, or maybe they renewed the certificate and just didn't replace it everywhere that it was being used. And as a result, every single Oculus VR headset stopped working. Now, they fixed it pretty quickly. I think the outage ended up being something like 6 or 7 hours, wasn't it? They say somewhere in here. But it was down for a little while. They fixed it, but it is a big black eye. It's something totally avoidable. And let me tell you guys the advanced, complex technology you can use to prevent this. When you buy a certificate, create a calendar item for the expiration date. Preferably create it a month before the expiration date. I was going to say, a few
days before that expiration, go ahead and set that up.
And that's one of the things we do, like with the ITProTV certificates, where I actually have a 3-month reminder, a 2-month reminder, and a 1-month reminder. And that's because at 3 months, that's usually when you're eligible to buy the renewal. They usually won't let you renew prior to 3 months. So that's when I like to do it. And then once you hit 2 months, now you're starting to get close. You need to get that changed out. but it might impact a lot of systems depending on how you're pushing that out. If you're using AWS and Terraform to deploy certificates, you might have this tied to multiple microservices. So then you need to get that taken care of, and it takes time. For Oculus to have this and actually have it hit the public has failed. Now they don't have that time. They've got to rush to get in there and change it, which increases your odds of making mistakes. So for everybody out there, if you're managing the certificates for your company, regardless of what they're used for, make a calendar, make a reminder, a to-do task, something like that to give you that heads up and keep track of those expiration dates.
Sounds good. Well, we've got another article here from TechCrunch, and this one is titled MoviePass CEO Proudly Says the App Tracks Your Location Before and After the Movies. So MoviePass, if you're not aware, it's kind of one of those new hot startups where basically you're paying, I think it's like $7.95 or something a month, and you can go see all the movies you want in the theater for just that low price. And apparently that does come at a cost, and the cost is all of your data being stored and likely sold to other advertisers that can maybe find out more information about you. Hey, you're going to dinner before the movie, or you want to get some ice cream after the movie, or go to a bar, or in your area. Now we're able to track that stuff. And what was interesting about this article is just how proud the CEO was of that, which, understandably so. They're doing some cool technology, but that's maybe something that's going to keep some people from going ahead and downloading this app, though most people probably don't care or don't notice.
I'm torn on this one, right? And the proudly part, that's not really like unbiased journalism. But what's the alternative here? He could have lied and not told us it did that. Like, oh, no, we just get you a great deal on movie tickets. Who doesn't want to save money?
Yeah, how dare you?
But he just comes right out and says, look, the way we're able to defray this cost. And I had asked that question last year when they announced MoviePass. The number I had heard was $10 a month. So I don't know what the actual fee is. I don't know if you can look that up or not. Yeah. But let's just pretend for a moment that it's $10 a month. At our local movie theater here, it's $10 to $12 for a ticket. So that matches a single ticket price. And if you go to the movies even just twice a month, you're getting your money's worth out of this. So I said, how is it possible that they're making money on this? I just assumed that it was an Uber-like situation where they had received a big round of funding and they were subsidizing the tickets, and then eventually their pricing model would change. Like eventually, one of these days, Uber's going to flip the switch and they're going to become just as expensive as cabs because they're subsidizing those driver fares. That's what I figured, but I'm probably wrong. I mean, that could still happen, certainly. But by tracking your location data prior to the movie and after the movie, that is advertising gold. That, hey, we just noticed that these 100 people all went to see the movie Predator, and then afterwards they went straight to Gold's Gym. And so we need to start putting advertisements for this other gym right before the movie Predator, and now everybody goes to the gym. Like that's a great marketing area, and if you had that knowledge, that is solid gold to somebody in the advertising industry.
Yeah, or they just saw this horror movie and now they're hiding under their bed at home.
Recommend a therapist.
Yeah, exactly. So MoviePass lists on their website, limited time offer done. Now only $7.95 a month, but you're billed for a full year, so 12 months plus that $9.95 processing fee, so $105.35 for the full year. And what I always love, offer available to first-time subscribers only. So if you've been a loyal customer, too bad. Yeah. You get to pay a lot more than all the nice people who are just signing up today.
And that seems like a steal. If you go to the movies 10 times, I mean, sometimes I see these deals and I'm like, I can't commit to go to that restaurant even once a month. But
I can go to a movie once a month. Yeah. What? Can I just turn off my location services for that app?
I wondered about that. Yeah. And my guess on this one is that you probably could, but when you go to check in, you have to fire up that app to get your barcodes. The app is running. Yeah. You would have to consciously kill off the app. Kill the app an hour prior to the movie. Or did they ever say the time? I don't think he says the time.
Well, I know in the amazing iPhone that you can tell a given app permission to use your location services all the time, use it only when that app is running, or never. So I would think that you could just use it only when the app's running, and then kill the app after you head into the theater.
This is where you get into a platform issue where, like, Google and Apple have different approaches as to what apps are allowed to do when they're running in the background.
Yeah.
And there've been some news stories about that. We didn't pick any this week, but where like Google was going to make it where apps couldn't access your microphone when they were in the background because there were some malware apps that were doing spying that way. And they were saying if you have a voice recorder or something, you got to keep it in the foreground in order to keep recording. If you put it in the back, it won't let it. So how they handle that is different. The actual quote from the CEO was this here. Let's get to it. He says, "We get an enormous amount of information. We watch how you drive from home to the movies. We watch where you go afterwards." Now, this has been edited down a little bit to take the context out from around it, so it sounds a little creepy. And reading it here allows us to put some license on it. So if I want to say this, we watch how you drive from home to the movies.
Oh man, that's
we
much
watch
worse.
where you go afterwards.
Yeah.
And now he's insidious, and he's
This reminds me of the movie I Know What You Did Last Summer.
There we go. Yeah,
and this summer and in between.
I know what movie you saw an hour ago, and I know where you went.
Well, speaking of snitches, our next article.
They get stitches.
Yes, I don't know. They should here. This is on CNET, and when I brought this up to Don's attention here, he pointed out this is something that came out earlier, but it's just there's new evidence to kind of back up the allegations that the FBI paid Geek Squad staff to be informants, according to these new documents. So basically, if you have Geek Squad come out to your house to fix your computer, they're going through everything you have and reporting that back to the FBI. No, that's not exactly true. And Best Buy has put out statements saying that we're not looking at anything past what we need to solve the problem. But basically, if we come across something, we'll report it. Which, in some states, they're legally required to. If they came across something, as horrible as child pornography or something, they have a legal obligation to go ahead and report that. So I guess the question is probably for most people who are sitting at home saying, well, I have tons of torrented movies on my computer. Are they going to rat me out? And maybe is that answer.
Well, so I can give some interesting perspective because I've been in this position. I'm not of having child porn on my laptop, but
thank you for the clarification.
I know this is important. But from being a laptop repair technician, way back in the day, I got my start doing computer repair, and I did Packard Bell warranties, which was very busy work. For our European viewers, you may still know Packard Bell because they still sell under that brand, but here in the U.S. they don't. And Compaq also, I did warranties for them.
First computer.
And I had a computer where a gentleman brought it into our office, and he had a hard drive that was full. I think it was like I'm going to put some dates on this stuff. So he had this like 80 megabyte hard drive, and he wanted to put in a 250 megabyte hard drive. So, getting pretty big.
Yeah.
And so I needed to back up his data, put in the new drive, and restore the data. Pretty easy process, and we had software for doing that. And I noticed how long the backup was taking, and it looked like it was stuck on a particular folder. And so I took a look to see what was going on. I thought there was corrupt data in there, and it turned out to be tons and tons of pictures. And when you pull up a folder like that in Windows or most operating systems, you get thumbnails, and it was pornography of the illegal sort. And we were obligated to call the sheriff's department and report that, and that was the process. I stumbled upon that because it was taking a long time to back up. I wasn't looking for it. And that's important because that's what Best Buy says is happening, is that they're not looking for it. But the part of the story that it kind of made me doubt the story when it originally came out was that the FBI supposedly was offering Geek Squad employees up to $500 for any systems that they reported. Anytime they found pornography and reported it to the FBI. So it was incentivized, right? It wasn't, it's our obligation to report it. It was, hey, here's this bonus. Well, if you dangle that in front of somebody who's making $8 an hour, or let me apologize for the Geek Squad. I've never worked for the Geek Squad, so I don't know what they get paid.
If you dangle that in front of someone that's driving a black and white VW Beetle for work, go on.
Yeah. So, these are a lot of times they're college kids, they're people out of high school that are good with computers, but they don't have a resume big enough to jump into the enterprise space. So they get their start at Geek Squad. A lot of people do. And if you dangle $500 in front of somebody like that, that's a good amount of money. And so they're now incentivized. They're going to look. They're going to say, oh man, if I can just find something on here, it's payday. And I'm not saying that one particular person did that. I couldn't even name somebody who works for the Geek Squad. But an incentive program like that is where this becomes a real violation, because normally for the FBI to look into somebody's laptop, they have to show that they had just cause.
Yeah,
they have
need
to
a
follow
warrant.
due process.
Yeah.
They get a warrant. Yeah. And with this, technically, you've signed authorization for the Geek Squad to mess around with your data. They don't need a warrant. They don't need due process or just cause. They can go in there and look. So a lot of people viewed this as a way for the FBI to skip the warrant process, like a warrantless search, and that's bad. And at the time, I kind of doubted the story was true. I was like, this just doesn't, I can't imagine the FBI paying out like that. But now, the reason this is back up in the news is the EFF released that they actually have documents that prove this was going on. So now it's not this theoretical story that may or may not have happened. They actually describe a 2008 meeting between Best Buy employees and the cyber working group to be able to discuss that. And it shows in another document where the FBI did a $500 payment to a confidential human source whose name was redacted. Now, again, let's put a little bit of scope on this. It says the FBI approved a $500 payment. So all we necessarily have proof of here is that they coached people on how to identify the material, and then they made one payment. So it's not necessarily a huge program, or it could be a huge program. That's yet to be seen. But the proof is the reason this is popping back up. And so for those of us, including myself, who kind of doubted the story, it's pretty hard to doubt it now since there's evidence.
Yeah, and it says in here, Best Buy said that 3 of the 4 employees who may have received payment are no longer employed by the company. So Best Buy is confirming there were at least 4, and the 4th was reprimanded and reassigned. So it sounds like Best Buy wasn't on board with this, and this maybe is the FBI coming directly to these people. I think we're going to find out more about this as it comes out. But you talked about, is someone going to see that carrot in front of them at $500 and say, maybe I'll dig a little deeper on his computer? I mean, to play devil's advocate here, the little devil guy on my shoulder is saying, hey, for $500, why don't I bring this little USB key, put something here and find it? So just when you have that kind of incentive on someone like this who is not a trained law enforcement professional,
right,
and doesn't have that same ethics, checks and balance that you hope someone at the FBI does, it's going to raise some privacy concerns, definitely.
And I generally try and steer clear of like politics and religion, but when I see a phrase like reprimanded and reassigned, I can think of another example where that didn't work out so well. So, yeah. So anyhow,
that's a story for next week. All right. So back to, I guess we talked about DDoS. Well, not DDoS attacks before. We talked about
no, this is a big one here.
And mining. But GitHub has survived the biggest DDoS attack ever recorded. This is on Wired.com, and this just took place when? Last week?
On Wednesday. Yeah.
On Wednesday. Okay. Yeah. So GitHub 1.35 terabits per second of traffic hit the GitHub developer platform, and it stayed online.
That's really amazing. GitHub has become such an important service that for developers today, if they want to store their source code somewhere that's easy to manage and work with other people, GitHub has become the de facto standard. That's where it goes. If GitHub were to go offline, that would affect tons and tons of companies.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if there were any of the Fortune 500 companies that didn't have at least some of their code base in GitHub, in private repositories. So it's a big deal for them to stay up, right? There's 2 significant parts to this story. One part is just the simple volume. 1.35 terabits of data is an insane amount of data. And let me put this in perspective. Most websites, your average website that's dealing with a small user base, maybe like under 100,000 visitors, they'll push typically like 20 megabits per second, maybe 25 megabits per second of data, just rendering web pages and delivering it. It's not a huge amount of data. Well, when you get to somebody like GitHub, they've got not just thousands of visitors, they have hundreds of thousands, millions of visitors every single day. So they're likely pushing several gigabits of data per second on a normal day. So it takes an even bigger amount of data to overwhelm them. This is the most data ever pushed in a single attack ever. And that's really hard to do. This attack only lasted, I think it was 8 minutes. They say it in the article somewhere.
It was within 10 minutes. They had brought in the DDoS mitigation service, which is Akamai, Prolexic, and so after 8 minutes, the attackers relented and stopped the assault. But the interesting things to me in this article is, they were saying the previous one was 1.2 terabits per second, and so Akamai had based their capacity on 5 times the previous largest attack, and so they were saying in here basically that we knew it could handle it, but actually seeing it do it is a whole nother thing, and definitely I'm sure some nail biting times for them.
We use a service from a company called Imperva, and their product is called Encapsula. It's a web application firewall, and they provide DDoS protection. And they did the same thing. They said, we want to plan for more bandwidth than whatever has been seen before. And so on their network, they have 6 terabit of bandwidth. And I remember talking to the engineers over there when we were setting all that up. And I said, man, 6 terabit, what? That seems like a little bit of overkill, doesn't it? That's an insane amount of traffic. And they said, well, one day that won't be an insane amount of traffic. That'll be the norm. And they were just kind of planning ahead. So you see an attack like this at 1.3, I think it was 1.35 terabits was the official number. So, that 6 terabits all of a sudden isn't 5 times anymore. Now it's only 4 times the maximum seen. They'll want to bump up, but it's a huge amount of data. And normally, this wouldn't have been possible, right? It takes an amplification attack for this to work. And we haven't seen a widespread amplification attack in quite some time. There used to be really easy ones like Ping of Death or Smurfs or whatever, where you'd send a ping and you could get servers to reflect it and hit hundreds and thousands of hosts off of one ping that you sent. Same thing with like the old finger protocol. That one you could exploit that way. Most of them get fixed really fast or just don't ever occur in the first place. This one is exploiting memcached, which is a shared memory cache that's used by a lot of web servers out there. And when I say a lot, I mean it's practically all the major websites that are out there that use Apache or Nginx. They use memcached to cache that data between the different servers and share the information. There's a vulnerability, or it's not a vulnerability anymore, now it's a full-on exploit, in memcached where an attacker can send data to it and have that server reflect it out. So an attacker sends 1 bit of data, and the memcached server then blasts it out as thousands of bits of data. And so they were able to do that across a large chunk of servers. At some point, I don't know if this article says it, but it
says 100,000 memcache servers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they had 100,000 servers reflecting, and that means it was the equivalent of probably over 1 million servers of activity, all being flooded right at GitHub. And they weren't able to sustain it very long because it is a very detectable thing. It'll bring down the net. So interesting to see that. Those attacks are just getting more and more dangerous every year.
Yeah. Let me clarify, actually. This says about 100,000 memcache servers currently sit exposed online with no authentication protection. So that wasn't how many were used necessarily in this attack, though. Okay. Though it certainly may have been, but that's the number that they found out there exist. And that actually brings us to our next article on the hackernews.com, which is about a kill switch to mitigate memcached DDoS attacks. So definitely something that could have been used there. But Don, how does something like this work? I mean, I kind of understand what you mean now with what the memcached servers do.
Sure.
But
so, there's this debate right now about whether you should be allowed to hack back, right? Mm-hmm. So if a hacker is trying to break into your system or an attack is being sent at you, are you allowed to reach back out and shut them down, right? And the reason it's frowned upon is that usually whoever's attacking you is not the actual attacker, right? So let's say that Peter, you want to attack my laptop.
I do.
Well, if it's your laptop hitting mine, yeah, I should be able to attack back. You started it, right? Mm-hmm. And 2 wrongs make a right. Everybody knows that. So I take you out. Well, if you compromised my grandmother's laptop and she didn't even know it, right? You just happened to get in there and now you're using her laptop to attack me and I attack back, I'm hurting some innocent victim, somebody who didn't even know this attack was going on. And so that's why it's frowned upon to hack back. But in this case, there's so many of these Memcached servers out there that aren't properly secured, that don't have proper authentication. This is kind of like the S3 bucket stuff where they just don't have authentication configured. That some security experts found that if you're getting attacked, those servers aren't secured. So you can send commands to those servers just like the attackers do. And so they said what you can do is you can write a script. And the company that did this is Carrero Network Security, which we interviewed them at...
we did, I think, at RSA.
It's RSA or Black Hat at one of the conferences. But the Carrero Network Services security team, they came up with this script that you could run. And what it would do is it would find the non-secured Memcached servers that were sending you traffic, and then you could set it to run every second, and you could send either shutdown or flush commands at it. Shutdown would effectively shut down the caching server, which is probably not the nicest thing to do in the world. But flush, you could send a flush command to it, or it's flush_all, and that would tell that caching server to just wipe out the data that it's sending. And you stop the attack for a second. But the attacker is still sending data to cause that reflection. And so you have to keep sending that flush command as long as the attack persists. But it allows you to mitigate it. And technically, it is hacking back. You are hacking somebody else's Memcached system, regardless of whether or not they are sending bad traffic at you. So it's a gray area as to whether or not this is legal, but it is a novel approach.
Well, are you sending that data to all Memcached devices, or just you're able to tell the ones that are hitting you and hit them back?
It's just the ones hitting you. Yeah, there's no way to say, like, I'm going to scan the whole internet and find all the vulnerable ones. So it is just the ones that are actively sending traffic to you. So that narrows it down a little bit. One thing I do want to point out is that they named their tool Memfixed, or Memfixed, Memfixed. And a lot of the articles that are out there are kind of labeling this weird. Hacker News says you've got kill switch to mitigate Memcached DDoS attacks, which is very accurate. This does not fix the flaw. It mitigates it. It stops it from affecting you, right? These people need to enable security on their Memcached servers. They need to properly secure that. And our web application firewalls and other devices that are out there need to be scrubbing this traffic and not allowing it through to prevent the vulnerabilities. So it's not really Memfixed. It's more like Memstopped. It would have been a better name, I think, because it doesn't actually fix the problem. But it's neat. It's an interesting approach, and you can certainly try it. Just be aware that it may well be illegal depending on which jurisdiction you fall in.
Sounds good. Well, what I'm going to do after this is go and check all my Memcache servers and make sure I do have authentication set up, and I hope that you will all do the same at home.
I wonder how many people, like Memcached really holds that market, but there are other, I think it was like APC is another one that's fairly popular. So I wonder if people...
Yeah,
it would be silly to see people move over to that one, because here, Memcached is perfectly fine. Put a stupid password on it. How hard is that to remember? That people just don't think about that. People
aren't the smartest, and that's a shame. Well, this next to last article here, we just got a couple left. This is from the Telegraph.co.uk, so GDPR or compliant, I'm assuming. This says, welcome to the era of the centabillionaire. Jeff Bezos is the first, but who will join him? So that would be people with over $100 billion, which, wow. So if you're Jeff Bezos, you're very happy about this article. And he was the first to pass that list, or pass that number on the Forbes list, which just came out. And I think... right behind him. So Bezos had 91 billion before. Now he's up to 123 billion. Lucky guy. And I think Bill Gates had about 89 billion or so. I've got to.
I'm not sure.
Answer a question.
When I read this, it made me think. Did you ever see the show Silicon Valley?
Oh yeah.
And there's the guy in there where he becomes a billionaire, and so he says he's in the 3 commas club, right?
He wants the doors that go like this, instead of the doors that go like this. Everybody's got that.
So what I'm wondering is, Jeff Bezos, $100 billion. That's a lot of money. If he can get 900 billion more, he could be the first person in the 4 commas club. Yeah. And how do your doors open then?
Other people do it, I assume.
You teleport or something. I don't know. Like that we're getting close to that. Interesting thing here is not just the doors and the commas, but how he did it, right? It's not like Amazon ran a big sale or had some new breakthrough product.
They had Christmas.
Their stock value went up.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he's a $100 billionaire. It was just a few months ago that their stock value went down, and all the news outlets were saying, like, Jeff Bezos loses, I forget, it was like $1.2 billion overnight, just gone. And it's just stock values fluctuating there. But it is neat to see somebody hit $100 billion.
Yeah, it's not like someone's coming to his house with a truck and taking out the extra money he had. It's all sitting there in the market. But yeah, if he liquidated everything right now, that's the value he would have basically. So pretty impressive.
They said he owns 16% of the shares in the company. That was in the article. So if 16% of the company is worth $100 billion, you can work that back.
Well, he's got some other stuff too. I mean, I know he owns the Washington Post. So I'm sure he has the space, not SpaceX, but the other one. He is putting things in space as well, and I don't think that's through Amazon. I think that's a completely separate company. So
okay,
yeah, there's some spaceship.
That's right. I remember that.
Because he's the one competing with.
Elon Musk has SpaceX, right?
Yeah,
and then there was the Virgin Galactic. And
if only there was something that could tell us.
Like Google.
Blue Origin is an American privately funded aerospace manufacturer.
I would not have guessed that.
Set up by Amazon.com founder Jeff Bezos. Yeah, apparently it's not doing as well because we've never really heard about that name. But I mean, if you're not sending a car into space these days, what are you doing?
Look, if you can't get me to the moon in 2 days or less, right? I want Moon Prime. Can Amazon Fresh make it to the? Yeah,
they're skipping right past the drone delivery and just going to space delivery. Well,
there you go.
One thing that will make Jeff a little less happy is what's happening, or what's been happening with Amazon Alexa devices, and that is that they have been freaking people out recently with unprompted just laughing. So imagine for a moment, if you will, you're at home, you're cooking dinner, chopping some vegetables in the counter. You got the windows open, hear the birds chirping, and then all of a sudden, right behind you, this laugh. And that's what's been happening to people's Amazon Alexa devices. And you were explaining a little bit about the command or how it's getting misinterpreted.
So what was going on here, I mean, it makes me laugh on several different levels, is that Amazon had a command that was really short that you could say, and it's okay for me to say this now because they've disabled the command, you could say, Alexa, laugh, right? Well, Alexa, laugh, that's only 2 syllables, right? I mean, it's really short. Oh, no, Alexa, sorry, that one's long, but I'm way off. It's 2 words. How about that? I went to school.
Yeah.
I didn't say I did well in school. I did say I did good.
Yeah.
So anyhow, it's a short command for Alexa. Most of the commands are longer. This one was short. And the shorter a command is, the more likely you can have a false positive on it. And so it was picking up false positives, or so they say. There's several people that say, hey, we were completely quiet. Nothing was going on. Maybe some birds chirping, and all of a sudden it goes off. So who knows? But in the past, if you would say, Alexa, laugh, it would then emit a laugh. And I'm saying emit because it's not like it played some human laughing. And it wasn't even in Alexa's voice. It was just this 3 ha's.
Yeah, I've got it here. I'll play it. I'm going to put my laptop near the mic here, and this is something that someone uploaded of their Alexa. So let's go ahead and listen. Well, that didn't work at all.
I know, it was creepy in its silence.
Yeah. Here we go. That doesn't even sound like the normal Alexa voice. That sounds like an audio recording of a laugh.
Yeah.
That it was playing, which is odd because that's not normally how it responds.
Did you ever watch those shows like Ghost Hunters or where they stay in a house
disembodied
at night,
voice,
and they've got the where they record the radio and they play it backwards and you hear that laugh.
Yeah. Well, and on those shows, typically I just laugh so much that I think it's saying "get out of the house." I think that's what I'm getting, and it's like nothing like that.
I'm pretty sure I heard a cat passing gas.
This is a pretty good laugh. So
I love those shows. They are so entertaining. But this one, it was a false positive. Well, it gets tricky for people like me where I've got Amazon Echoes all over the place, which if you work for the FBI and you do surveillance on me, the Echo is certainly the way to do it.
They know.
Yeah, you've already got access and a backup of my hard drive. Yeah. So But those echoes, it's so that I can ask questions wherever I am. In fact, I have to mute mine over here before we start the podcast each time. To have it just like randomly kind of do the creepy laugh like that could spook people. You certainly want your product to be received well and not creepy. So Amazon fixed this really fast. And what they did is, first off, they shut off the Alexa laugh command. That's gone. Now, if you want it to laugh, you have to say, and this might trigger your Alexa, so be ready. Alexa, can you laugh? And so you have to ask it to laugh. And if it does, then it laughs. And they replaced that. So it's not even the ha 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 anymore.
It was a tee-hee.
Well, and she talks too. She says, yes, I can laugh. Tee-hee, right? Which is pretty lame.
And which you know then at that point, hey, that's my Alexa talking. I recognize that voice.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see more of this over the years as these devices are designed to fit painlessly in your home and be happy and friendly.
Yeah, I think as they become self-aware, we'll start to see more and more of this as they just find things funny that you say.
I'm waiting for my Rosie the robot, like in the Jetsons. And if you're under 30, that probably means nothing to you. But this robot is supposed to just help you do everything, right? Yeah. And we don't have that. I don't know.
Yeah, I want my Alexa to know that I'm watching a sad movie and to just start sobbing.
Come give you a hug.
Me. Yeah, yeah. I want all my devices to have emotion. So. Well, speaking of emotions, I'm sad to say that this is the end of the ITProTV podcast for this week, week 10. But luckily, there will be plenty of more things hacked in the coming week, hopefully. And actually, well, not next week, but the week after that, Don and I are going to be down at InfoSec, so we're going to be grabbing a lot of great interviews there. That's the InfoSec World Congress in Orlando. So we'll grab those. Maybe we'll even film some stuff down there for the podcast and bring that up and watch that. But next week we'll be back as normal with our regularly scheduled programming. But like I said, for now, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the podcast. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes or your favorite service and like this, share with your friends, and let everyone know how much you love the ITProTV podcast. And until next time, for Don, I am Peter. And turn off your Alexa.